The massive crystal walls of the Galactic Council building sparkled under three suns, but Blue wasn't paying attention to the view. The young clerk's four eyes were fixed on the data floating in front of him, his outer eyelids blinking rapidly as he double-checked the numbers. Something was wrong. Very wrong. He ran the scan again, his delicate fingers trembling slightly as they moved through the holographic display. The results stayed the same. According to the data, a species called humans had formally requested the great test of civilization. That alone wasn't unusual. Many species did. What made Blue's stomach knot up was the timing. Every known spacefaring race had followed the same pattern. They would achieve faster than light travel, make contact with the Council, and then spend centuries preparing for the test. The shortest preparation time had been 342 standard years. The longest was nearly 1,000. But these humans, they had barely been in space for a century. Blue looked around the vast archive room. Thousands of crystalline data cores hummed quietly, each containing the histories of different civilizations. He had worked here for 15 years, processing applications and maintaining records. It was usually quiet, peaceful work. But now, he pulled up Earth's file, expanding it in the air before him. The planet itself was enough to make him nervous. Class 3 Death World. Extreme temperature variations, regular natural disasters, dangerous predators, high gravity, toxic and corrosive substances occurring naturally. The fact that any species had evolved there at all was remarkable. The humans' history made him even more uneasy. They had achieved spaceflight while still fighting among themselves. Their first steps into space had been part of a weapons race. Even now, they had multiple competing governments. According to standard predictions, they shouldn't even be thinking about the test for at least another 400 years. Yet here was their request, properly filed, and waiting for processing. Blue did what any sensible bureaucrat would do. He tried to find a way to reject it on technical grounds. But the application was perfect. Every form was filled out correctly. Every requirement was met. They even included the traditional offering of their planet's most valued art and cultural works. He pulled up the cultural package, thinking he might find something inappropriate that would disqualify them. The first item was labeled Mozart, Symphony No. 40. Blue let the music flow through the neural interface. It was beautiful, complex, refined. Not at all what he expected from a species that had evolved on a planet where everything tried to kill them. The next item was different. Stand-up comedy, global collection. Blue watched, confused, as humans stood before crowds, talking about their lives, their world, their fears, and making people laugh about them. They joked about death, about disasters, about their own extinction, and their audiences roared with laughter. This was not normal. None of this was normal. With trembling appendages, Blue pressed his authentication crystal to the application. He had to pass this up the chain. The system acknowledged his action with a soft chime, and somewhere in the vast building, Administrator Gray's terminal would be chiming as well. Blue sat back in his support cradle, all four eyes closing briefly. In 15 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. The test wasn't just a formality. It had been designed eons ago to ensure that species were truly ready for their place in the galactic community. It measured their stability, their wisdom, their ability to face the harsh truths of existence. Every species approached it with centuries of preparation, meditation, and philosophical development. Every species treated it with the utmost seriousness and gravity. Every species understood its profound importance. But these humans, they had barely mastered fusion drives, and here they were, asking to take the test as casually as if they were applying for a trading license. And they had included jokes about death in their cultural package. As Blue began composing his report, he couldn't shake the feeling that something unprecedented was about to happen. The humans were either going to fail spectacularly, or they were going to force the Council to reconsider everything they thought they knew about civilization. Either way, for the first time in his career, Blue was genuinely excited to come to work tomorrow. He had a feeling the archives were about to get much more interesting. Administrator Gray stared at the holographic display with growing concern. The notification from the junior clerk had pulled him away from his morning meditation, and now he wished he had finished it. He needed inner peace to deal with this. The human's application for the test sat in front of him, glowing softly in the dim light of his office. Gray had been an administrator for over 200 years, but he had never seen anything quite like this. He expanded Earth's file, and the more he read, the more his scales bristled with worry. These humans weren't just from a death world. They seemed to embrace it. Their entertainment was full of dangerous activities. Their sports often risked injury. They had something called extreme tourism, where they deliberately went to the most dangerous places on their already dangerous planet. For fun. Computer, Gray spoke quietly. Show me their response to preliminary question 3. How does your species handle fear? The answer materialized in the air. We face it. Sometimes we run from it. Sometimes we fight it. Most of the time we joke about it. Depends on the day, really. Gray read the response 3 times. Every other species had written essays about meditation techniques, philosophical frameworks, or psychological management systems. The humans had written 2 sentences and added what appeared to be a casual afterthought. He pulled up their recent history, trying to understand how they had survived long enough to develop space travel. The images made him uncomfortable. Humans running toward burning buildings to save others. Humans diving into dangerous waters during storms to rescue strangers. Humans living in places that regularly experienced devastating natural disasters, rebuilding each time with almost stubborn cheerfulness. Computer, show me their disaster response protocols. The screen filled with images of humans wearing bright orange suits, rushing into danger. Others in red trucks racing toward fires. Teams of humans dropping from aircraft into storm-ravaged areas. And everywhere, in every crisis, there were humans helping humans, often at great risk to themselves. But what truly puzzled Gray was their attitude. In the midst of these disasters, humans could be seen smiling, making jokes, sharing what they called gallows humor. It was as if they had evolved to treat mortal danger as an inconvenience rather than a threat. He checked their military history, hoping to find something that would disqualify them. Instead, he found more puzzles. Their soldiers used humor to cope with combat stress. Their emergency workers made dark jokes after saving lives. Their medical personnel dealt with death daily and somehow maintained their sanity through what they called inappropriate humor. Gray rubbed his temple ridges, feeling a headache coming on. The test was designed to expose species to their greatest fears, to ensure they had the emotional and philosophical maturity to handle the harsh realities of the galaxy. But how do you test a species that already lives with their greatest fears and makes jokes about them? He opened a communication channel to the council chamber. This would require a full assembly. As he waited for the connection, he reviewed the humans' entertainment package. They had included something called disaster movies, where they imagined various ways their civilization might end, and turned them into entertainment. They had games where players survived apocalyptic scenarios, for fun. The council connection chimed, and Gray took a deep breath. Honored council members, we have a situation that requires immediate attention. We have received a test application from Earth. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Someone spoke up. The Deathworld species. They're centuries too early. Yes, Gray continued, but their application is technically perfect. We have no grounds to reject it. Another voice. But they're not ready. They still have wars. They have wars, Gray agreed, and natural disasters, and predators, and regular brushes with death. And they appear to have adapted to all of it. They don't just survive their death world. They seem to thrive on it. The council chamber fell silent as Gray shared the human's file. He could hear the collective intake of breath as the other members reviewed the data. Finally, the first speaker's voice filled the chamber. We must send an observer. We need to understand these humans before we can decide whether to allow the test. Gray nodded in agreement, but privately he wondered if they were asking the wrong question. Perhaps they shouldn't be asking whether humans were ready for the test, but whether the test was ready for humans. Senior Observer White stepped out of his cloaked ship and immediately regretted not checking the local weather. Rain poured from dark clouds, and in the distance, lightning split the sky. His protective field sparkled as it kept him dry, but the sheer violence of Earth's weather made his inner membranes quiver. He had chosen to arrive in a place humans called New York City. According to the briefing, it was one of their larger population centers. The council wanted him to observe how humans behaved in their natural habitat before making a final decision about their test application. A ground-shaking rumble made him freeze in panic before he realized it was just one of their underground transport vehicles. Humans called it a subway. They had built a vast network of tunnels under their cities and trusted them not to collapse. The very idea made White's skin pale even whiter than usual. He watched as humans rushed past him, completely invisible to them thanks to his cloaking technology. Most held small force fields over their heads, umbrellas, the briefing had called them. Many were looking at handheld devices even as they walked, somehow avoiding collisions without even paying attention. A loud screech made him jump. Two large metal vehicles had almost hit each other on the rain-slicked road. The drivers leaned out of their windows, shouting and making aggressive hand gestures. White prepared to document an outbreak of violence, but after a few moments, both drivers simply continued on their way. Just another day in the city, he heard someone mutter as they walked past. White followed a group of humans into one of their towering buildings. The structure swayed slightly in the wind, and none of the humans seemed to care that they were in a moving building hundreds of meters tall. They stepped into a small metal box, an elevator, and casually chatted as it lifted them up at alarming speeds. He spent the next few hours observing their workplace behavior. They sat in chairs that could roll and swivel, seemingly unconcerned about falling. They drank hot liquids that could burn them. They ate while working, risking choking. Every few minutes, White noticed another casual disregard for safety that would have horrified any other species. Around midday, alarms began blaring throughout the building. White's research indicated this was a fire drill, but many humans treated it like an inconvenience rather than a safety measure. They slowly gathered their belongings, complaining about the timing. "Of course it's raining during the fire drill," one human said, making others laugh. "Maybe the building's actually on fire this time," another replied with a grin. "That would make this more interesting." White couldn't believe his ears. They were joking about their shelter burning down. He followed them down the emergency stairs, listening to their conversations. They made jokes about falling down the stairs, about the building collapsing, about dying at work to avoid a meeting. Each dark joke was met with laughter rather than horror. Outside, standing in the rain, White watched a human child chase a floating light device, a bubble, near the edge of what humans called a sidewalk. The child's parent casually reached out to pull them back from the dangerous vehicles rushing past, never stopping their conversation on their communication device. As the day went on, White observed countless similar moments. Humans constantly faced death and danger, but they treated these threats like minor annoyances. They had built their civilization in defiance of their planet's attempts to kill them, and now they treated survival as if it were easy. When darkness fell, White returned to his ship and began composing his report. How could he explain what he had seen? How could he convey that humans didn't just cope with danger? They seemed almost bored by it. He wrote, "Humans have not conquered their fears. They have not transcended them through meditation or philosophy. Instead, they have done something unprecedented. They have domesticated their fears. They keep their fears as pets, take them for walks, play with them, and even make jokes about them." Looking out at the city lights twinkling in the rain, White added a final note. The test assumes that facing one's greatest fears requires preparation, wisdom, and spiritual growth. But humans face their fears before breakfast, complain about them during lunch, and laugh at them during dinner. I am no longer certain that our test is equipped to evaluate such a species. He sent the report, knowing it would cause a stir in the council. But as another bolt of lightning illuminated the sky, and the humans below continued their evening without a second glance, White couldn't help but wonder if perhaps humans had something to teach the galaxy about fear. The testing chamber looked like polished silver from floor to ceiling. Tom walked in wearing his old firefighter's t-shirt and jeans, hands in his pockets, looking more like he was going to a casual dinner than facing the most important test in galactic history. Administrator Gray watched through the observation window, his scales twitching with nervous energy. Behind him, White and Blue stood quietly, while a dozen council members floated in their ceremonial pods. None of them knew quite what to expect. "You understand the gravity of this situation?" Gray asked through the communication system. "This test will expose you to your species' deepest fears. Most civilizations spend centuries preparing their representatives." Tom shrugged. "Yeah, I read the manual. Hit me with your best shot." Blue made a quiet chirping sound of distress at the casual response. One of the council members whispered, "He's treating this like some kind of game." The chamber hummed to life. The silver walls began to ripple like water, and the air filled with a soft blue light. The test was beginning its scan of Tom's mind, connecting to the collective unconscious of humanity to find their greatest fears. "The scan usually takes several hours," Gray explained. "Try to remain calm and—" "Done," the chamber's AI announced. "What?" Gray checked his instruments. "That's impossible. The scan takes hours to properly map the species' psychological landscape." "Scan complete," the AI repeated. "Human psychological patterns are remarkably direct and accessible. Beginning simulation." The chamber's walls dissolved into darkness. Stars appeared all around them, and Earth came into view. It looked peaceful, beautiful, blue and green and perfect. Then the simulation began its work. A massive asteroid appeared, heading straight for Earth. Nuclear missiles rose to meet it, but they weren't enough. The impact was devastating. Continents cracked. Oceans boiled. Humanity faced extinction. Tom watched calmly. The simulation shifted. Now it showed a pandemic sweeping across the globe. Millions dying. Cities becoming ghost towns. The end of civilization as quarantines failed and systems collapsed. Tom scratched his nose, looking almost bored. The scene changed again. Alien warships filled the sky. They were enormous, unstoppable, armed with weapons that could shatter planets. Humanity's defenses fell. Cities burned. The end of everything approached. Tom yawned. "This isn't right," Gray muttered. "The test is showing their species' extinction, their complete annihilation. Over and over. Why isn't he reacting?" The simulation tried something new. Now it showed humanity surviving, but alone. Every attempt to contact alien life failed. The stars were empty. Humanity would float alone in an uncaring universe forever. Tom checked his watch. "Is the system malfunctioning?" One of the council members asked. No species has ever shown this level of indifference to their own extinction. The simulation shifted faster now, trying different scenarios. Solar flares, gray goo, AI rebellion, zombie virus, nuclear war, climate disaster. For each one, Tom's reaction ranged from mild interest to complete boredom. Finally, he raised his hand like a student in class. "Hey, is this going to take much longer? Because I've seen all these. Like, multiple times. We made movies about them. Got video games, books, TV shows. There's this one show where we combine zombies and nuclear war. Pretty cool, actually." The council chamber erupted in confused discussion. Gray stared at the human in disbelief. White nodded slowly, as if this confirmed everything he had observed on Earth. You've imagined all these scenarios before?" Gray asked. "Oh yeah. We got whole genres for this stuff. My kid's playing a game right now where you survive after a robot apocalypse. My mom's reading a book about the world flooding. Think we got a movie coming out next month about aliens eating the sun. Tom grinned. Want me to recommend some? The classics are pretty good. The simulation flickered, trying to find something, anything, that would shake the humans' casual acceptance of extinction-level events. But with each new scenario, Tom just looked more amused. I think, White said quietly, we may need to reconsider our definition of psychological readiness. Gray couldn't argue. The test was designed to prepare species for the harsh realities of the universe. But how you test a species that had already faced every imaginable end of the world and turned them all into entertainment? The testing chamber's AI was running out of options. For the first time in its ancient existence, it faced a problem it couldn't solve. A being who refused to be properly terrified. The walls rippled again, and the scene changed to show Earth being devoured by a black hole. Time and space twisted. Reality itself bent and broke. The end of everything approached in the most final way possible. Tom started laughing. Not a nervous laugh, not a scared laugh. A genuine deep belly laugh that echoed through the chamber and made the council members shift uncomfortably in their floating pods. I'm sorry, Tom said, wiping tears from his eyes. But this is exactly like that movie poster Jack had on his wall when we were kids. The black hole even has the same purple edges. Man, that was a terrible movie. The physics were all wrong. The AI tried again. This time, it showed a time paradox destroying the universe. Past, present, and future collided in impossible ways. Tom laughed harder. Oh man, this is great. We had a TV show about this. The hero had to keep fixing timeline mistakes, but he kept making everything worse. It ran for like 6 seasons. My daughter wrote fan fiction about it. In the observation room, Administrator Gray turned to White with a look of complete confusion. Is he enjoying this? White nodded slowly. During my observation of Earth, I noticed they have something called disaster movies and apocalyptic fiction. They turned their fears into entertainment, but I never realized how deeply this went. The AI made one final attempt. The simulation showed humanity evolving backwards, losing their intelligence, their technology, their civilization, everything that made them human. They would become simple animals again, their greatest achievements forgotten. Tom had to lean against the chamber wall. He was laughing so hard now. Stop, he gasped between laughs. This is too much. We literally have a comedy movie about this. Bunch of guys at a hot tub party accidentally travel back in time and almost mess up human evolution. It's hilarious. Blue, who had been quietly watching from the back, stepped forward. I don't understand. These are extinction-level events. The end of your species. The death of everything you know. How can you laugh? Tom wiped his eyes, getting his laughter under control. Look, here's the thing. We humans, we live on a planet that's tried to kill us since day one. We've had ice ages, supervolcanoes, giant meteors, killer viruses, you name it. We're still here. He gestured at the simulation, which was still cycling through various apocalyptic scenarios. Every single one of these things. We've thought about them, written about them, made movies about them, turned them into games. We've imagined every possible way our world could end, and then we've imagined ourselves surviving it. But why make them into entertainment? One of the council members asked. Because what else are you gonna do? Sit around being scared all the time? Tom shrugged. We learned a long time ago that fear is less scary when you can laugh at it, when you can turn it into a story or a game or a joke. The chamber fell silent. The AI, having exhausted its database of existential terrors, simply displayed a soft blue light. Besides, Tom continued, most of these scenarios, we're actually preparing for them. We've got teams tracking asteroids, scientists working on pandemic cures, plans for colonizing other planets, but we're doing it while making jokes and telling stories. Because that's what humans do. Gray looked at the test readings in disbelief. According to every metric they had, the human should be curled up in terror. Instead, his stress levels were lower than when he'd entered the chamber. He was genuinely having fun. "I believe," White said quietly, "we have made a significant error in our testing methodology. We assumed that facing existential fears required serious contemplation and centuries of philosophical preparation. We never considered that another valid approach might be to make fun of them." Tom was now pointing at various apocalyptic scenes and rating them like movie reviews. "That one's a bit derivative. Oh, but that one's creative. Never seen a doomsday scenario with giant space hamsters before. Hey, mind if I take some notes? My brother writes science fiction. He'd love this." The testing chamber, designed to break spirits and test the limits of sapient minds, had instead become humanity's most sophisticated entertainment system. And in that transformation lay a truth that would change how the galaxy understood fear itself. The council chamber looked different now. The floating pods had descended to floor level, and the normal strict seating arrangement had dissolved into small clusters of beings deeply engaged in discussion. Tom sat in the center, drinking something the humans called coffee, yet another substance that would be toxic to most species. "Let me understand this correctly," said the first speaker, leaning forward. "Your species deliberately imagines worst-case scenarios for fun." "Well, yeah," Tom said, taking another sip. "We call it different things. Thought experiments, fiction, disaster planning. Sometimes we just sit around and ask what-if questions. Like, what if the moon suddenly turned into cheese? That would be devastating to your planet's gravitational system." Blue exclaimed, horrified. "Exactly. And then we figure out what would happen. How long until it starts melting? Would we try to eat it? Could we still live on Earth? Someone probably already wrote a book about it." White, who had been quietly taking notes, spoke up. "During my time on Earth, I observed something they call disaster preparedness. I thought it was a serious governmental function, but now I understand it's part of this larger pattern." Tom nodded. "Sure is. We have official plans for zombie outbreaks, alien invasions, you name it. Started as jokes, but then people actually put real thought into them. Turns out, planning for zombies helps you plan for real emergencies too." Gray, who had been reviewing the test results for the 100th time, shook his head in wonder. "Your entertainment libraries. They're actually survival manuals in disguise." "Sometimes, yeah. But mostly they're just stories. Stories about people facing impossible odds. About hope. About finding light in the darkness." Tom grinned. "Also about blowing stuff up, because explosions are cool." One of the younger council members, who had been frantically studying human culture on their data pad, looked up. "I found something called post-apocalyptic comedy. This cannot be real. Oh man, those are some of the best." Tom's eyes lit up. "There's this one where a guy survives the end of the world and spends his time recreating famous paintings using trash. It's hilarious." The council members exchanged glances. One of them spoke softly. "We have been measuring species' readiness by their ability to face fear with gravity and wisdom. But these humans, they face it with creativity and laughter." "You know what's funny?" Tom said, finishing his coffee. "Back home, there's this old saying, laugh in the face of death. We say it like it's brave, but honestly, sometimes laughing is just the natural response. When something's so big and scary that you can't do anything about it, well, you might as well find the humor in it." White's notes were now floating in a holographic display. "I've analyzed their historical responses to actual disasters. The pattern is consistent. In their darkest moments, humans create jokes, art, and stories. It's not denial. They still take action, make plans, solve problems. But they do it while maintaining this ability to laugh. It's like a superpower," Blue said suddenly, making everyone turn to look at him. The junior clerk seemed embarrassed but continued. Most species try to overcome their fears by becoming stronger than them. Humans made their fears into entertainment until the fears became smaller than them. The first speaker stood, drawing all attention. We designed the test to measure a species' readiness to face the harsh realities of the galaxy. We assumed this required serious contemplation, philosophical development, and carefully cultivated wisdom. They paused, looking at Tom with all four eyes. But perhaps we were measuring the wrong things. Tom shrugged. Maybe there's more than one way to be ready. You can spend centuries preparing to face your fears, or you can learn to live with them every day, make friends with them, and eventually start making fun of them. The chamber fell quiet as the implications sank in. Generations of accumulated wisdom about psychological development and species advancement were being challenged by a human who treated extinction-level events like movie plots. There is much we need to reconsider, the first speaker said finally. But one thing is clear. We have greatly underestimated the power of humor as a tool for survival. Tom raised his empty coffee cup. Want to hear a joke about the heat death of the universe? I promise it's not that dark. Well, technically it is, but that's kind of the point. The sound of alien laughter, hesitant at first but growing stronger, echoed through the ancient chamber for the first time in its history. News spread quickly through the galaxy. Every species had their own name for humans now. The laughing ones, the fear tamers, the Deathworlders who smile. But the name that stuck, the one that appeared in official galactic records, was simple: the species that laughed. 6 months after Tom's test, the council chamber was packed with representatives from 100 worlds. Blue had been promoted to senior cultural advisor, and he stood proudly next to his new human colleagues. They were teaching him something called dad jokes, though he still didn't understand why parents were considered funnier than non-parents. Administrator Gray watched from his pod as humans shared their stories, movies, and games with the galaxy. Some species were horrified at first, others were fascinated, but all of them were learning. The humans have started a trend, White reported to the assembly. Species across the galaxy are experimenting with new ways to face their fears. The Floatians have created their first comedy about gravitational failure. The crystallines are making entertainment about crystal rot, their deepest fear for millennia. A crystalline representative sparkled with amusement. We call it Breaking Bad. This earned a round of laughter from the humans present, who immediately began explaining the reference. The first speaker raised their appendages for attention. We have gathered today to announce significant changes to the great test of civilization. Our old methods, while valuable, were incomplete. Tom, now serving as Earth's official ambassador, sat with his feet propped up on a floating platform. He had tried to explain the concept of Casual Friday to the council, but somehow it had turned into Casual Everyday. The galaxy was still adjusting. The test will now measure not just a species' ability to face fear, the first speaker continued, but their ability to adapt to it, to live with it, and yes, even to find joy in spite of it. The humans have shown us that true resilience comes in many forms. In the months since Tom's test, humanity had shared more than just their entertainment. They taught other species about emergency response teams, about finding humor in dark times, about the importance of both preparing for the worst and being able to laugh about it. Some humans had opened what they called apocalypse preparation theme parks on other worlds. Species would visit to experience simulated disasters in a safe environment, learning to face their fears while having fun. The waiting lines were surprisingly long. Furthermore, the first speaker announced, "We are establishing a new division, the Department of Creative Emergency Response. Its mission will be to help species develop both practical and psychological tools for facing universal threats. Its first director will be Administrator Gray." Gray's scales turned a deep blue with surprise. He had been skeptical of humans at first, but their approach had grown on him. Just last week, he had caught himself making a joke about cosmic radiation. And finally, the first speaker concluded, We are officially recognizing a new form of species advancement, one based not on the elimination of fear, but on the ability to live with it, to transform it, and to help others do the same. Tom raised his hand. We have a word for that on Earth. We call it teaching people to vibe with it. Blue, who had been studying Earth language, quickly whispered translations to the confused council members. Several made notes to update their linguistic databases. As the assembly concluded, species mingled and shared stories. A group of Flotians were enthusiastically describing their new disaster comedy series. Crystal beings were teaching humans their version of joke-telling, which involved complex light patterns. In one corner, a serious-looking alien was trying to understand the concept of gallows humor, while humans attempted to explain why near-death experiences were sometimes funny. White, completing his final observation report, wrote, "The humans did not just pass the test. They transformed it. They showed us that the greatest wisdom might not lie in overcoming our fears, but in learning to dance with them. Their gift to the galaxy was not a solution to fear, but a new way of living with it." He paused, then added, "Also, they introduced something called memes to the galactic community. The implications of this are still being studied, but the first speaker has already been turned into something called a reaction GIF. The humans assure us this is an honor." In the Great Archives, Blue had created a new section labeled Human Coping Mechanisms. It was filled with movies, books, games, and jokes about every conceivable disaster. A sign hung over the entrance, written in every galactic language. Sometimes the best way to face the darkness is to light it up with laughter.